Hey friends, this is a bit of a heavy one, and I want to take a few minutes to give some response from my side to the terrible, tragic, heinous, horrible death, murder of George Floyd this week. And obviously so much of that going on that is unseen but experienced by so many all the time, so many of my friends. And I want to tell you why I don't have any black friends. And I know that's controversial, but stay with me for a moment. See, I want to share a miracle that happened with me one day on a dusty road many years ago. See, I grew up in South Africa, apartheid South Africa. I went to a whites-only school. I went to whites-only toilets. I played on whites-only beaches. All through my school life, I lived in this system, this terrible system. And then when I left school, I went to the Navy, and in the Navy I was invited by a friend to church, and this was a church that two particular things about this church. They preached the good news of Jesus Christ, and they were on the forefront of racial reconciliation and challenging the status quo with much opposition coming their way. And it was in this community, this church community, that I heard the good news of Jesus and I surrendered my life to him. And it was such a beautiful thing to come into such a multicultural, multi-ethnic community. From what I'd been in into this was transformation. And I observed this, and I considered the good gospel, and I decided to put my faith in Jesus Christ. And so much changed in my life for the better because of that decision. But it was a few months later when I went home to where I grew up. I went home for a weekend or a break. And I was driving on the dusty road to the little farm where I grew up. It was on that farm that I had a miracle. All my past met me. I was confronted with all my past on that road. I won't tell you exactly what happened to me because I don't want you to be going after the similar experience. But I had a revelation that God created us all equal and of equal value. And on that road, I was confronted with that. And then I had a revelation of the gospel that broke down every wall of partition, every wall of division, not just between me and God, but me and everyone, to make us one. The prayer of Jesus to make us one. All of this came together, and I had an encounter over there. And since that day, I can honestly tell you I have not had black friends or gay friends or white friends. Yes, I've had friends that are black and gay and white. And my point is simply this. I know you want to write to me and comment about me being colorblind and all that. And I understand that our color, our background, our ethnicity, our stories, my story, I have a family story that if only you knew it, you would understand a lot about me. And I understand those things are important because they are part of who we are. But I also understand above all of that we are first created in the image of God. And my first definition of you is not your gender, your sexuality, or your culture, or your ethnicity, or your color of your skin. My first definition of you is that you are a child of God. You are created in the image of God, one who is made in his image. And I really am totally convinced that if we don't start there, we will never address the issue of racism right in our hearts and in your hearts. So I had this miracle, and I pray this miracle for our world as well. I pray it for you if you need it. A change to see people as God the Creator saw them, as Jesus stepped into our world and crossed the boundaries. He led the way. And if we follow him, we will end up understanding the value of every single human being without prejudice, without hatred, without oppression. None of that stuff can show up in your life if you're following the one who led the way in that. And can I just say it as clearly as I can? If you call yourself a Christian, a believer in Jesus Christ, a follower, a disciple, there is absolutely no room for any racism, sense of superiority, oppression. There is no space for that in the life of a follower of Jesus, nor in his church, in his body. His prayer was that we would be one, and this includes valuing everybody equally, irrespective of any of their background or whatever. Where do we start? I just got to admit, I can't change the world, and I don't think you can either. But I can change my world, I can change myself, and I can change the world that I'm in and have influence in. Let's start with me, because change often starts right at the inside, right here. I've got to look at my feelings towards others. I've got to listen to what comes out of my mouth. I've got to consider my reactions to certain things and situations that are so-called racist. When they come, when I'm confronted with that, what are the things? What are my reactions from the inside? That'll tell me a lot about where I really am at. For instance, a family member of mine was nearly killed just last week by a drunk driver. Smashed into him in his motorbike, car into the motorbike. Man, he was so close to death. I'm so thankful that didn't happen. But here's the question. Does it matter whether the driver was white or black? Does it matter in the story? It's a good question, because if that is a question, then it may be an indication of something in there. It doesn't matter. The action is the same. The consequence is the same. It's not the color of man's skin that determines whether that was a terrible thing to do or not, to happen or not. We need to search our hearts, and we need to search our own community. I have influence in our world, and I live in a community of our Every Nation London church community, our Europe, our global Every Nation community. And in this community, we do have a dream. We have a dream of being every nation, tongue and tribe, of tasting a bit of heaven on earth, where we are one, where we value each one, every person equally and the same. And nobody is looked down upon or separated or sidelined because of the color of their skin or their culture or their nationality or their accents and all of this, that we can be one and be an example to the world. But even in our community, we have to look at each other. We have to have the hard conversations, because it's a journey to understand one another, to understand what we're really going through, understand how these things that happen in this case, on the other side of the world, really affect our relationships. How do we relate to one another? Are we as one as we say we are? I pray that we'll have those hard conversations with one another. And I want to invite you, by the way, if you're part of our community, please send me a message. Let me know if you think there is anything that is whether it's micro or macro racism, whatever you want to call it. How do you experience it? Do you experience belonging, oneness in our community? And if not, what can we do about it? What are we not seeing? What am I not seeing? How did you experience when you walked into and have been part of the Every Nation London community? I want us to have those hard conversations, because I know that there are many of us, many friends among us, many of you that are hurting, that experience this in many different ways than I do. And I just want to say we are committed to working together. And when we understand, we can take action. We can take the right action. We can have the right response to injustices, the terrible injustices, the unjust, and we can take the stand together and be the example and be the change we want to see. I want us to pray Psalm 139, the last two verses, with sincerity, where David says, "Search my heart, O God, and see if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Try me, know me, and lead me out of this into your ways." This is my prayer for you, friends. We're going to try and have a conversation, a public conversation about this. Maybe this next week. I'll try and pull it off in the next short while. So may we be one and love one another, even as God loved us, despite us. Amen.